Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome back. So if you've been with me prior to our short break, you'd have heard me discussing a key question which came to me from several people over the days and weeks of how to maintain a certain level of performance, maybe not at the same level as Ramadan, but a certain level of performance in the weeks and months up until the next Ramadan. Two questions we got prior to our break from our caller, the caller, I should say, in which he asked two quite diverse, different, but interesting nonetheless questions. Number one, why do we find, generally speaking, that the Imam or the Alim or the Hafiz or the Scholar of Deen or whatever title he has or is given, he is slightly plump? Okay, slightly rounded on the edges, let's use words like that. Slightly overweight maybe as far as that I will go, with a nice little rounded belly in front of him. How does that happen? Well, what tends to happen, you see, is because most teach late in the evening. So what you find is that the ulama will start teaching at 4 or 5 o'clock usually, because the school children are at school during the daytime. So during the daytime, they'll be relatively free. If they have another job, then they may be at the other job, but generally speaking, they may be free, and it's always in the evening they get busy. So when they finish teaching at 7, at 8, 9, 10, whatever, then they'll come home and have something to eat. Now, it could be obviously that they may be eating slightly more that they should be, and then what happens is, because they don't look at some kind of physical exercise or some kind of training, what happens is it sticks. So this is more a case of, becoming a little bit more aware of one's bodily needs. What happens, and this happens with all of us, I remember when I was a young 20-year-old and a 30-year-old, I could eat a horse, literally. And, my metabolism was such that, alhamdulillah, you couldn't even tell that I'd eaten. But what happens when we reach our 40s and we start to get to the other end of our 40s and going into our 50s, you eat a small morsel and it kind of stays with you for days on end. Also, what happens is, obviously, when we are much younger, you have a very busy, active life. Whether it's sports you get involved in or just generally just kind of moving around and working, you tend to be kind of more manual labor, more physical labor. But as you get older, you take kind of more of an office job, more of a sedentary lifestyle. You slow down basically, so you're consuming the same amount, but your lifestyle has now slowed down, and you're not taking any exercise. So those are three kind of worst things that could come together, and that happens a lot more with scholars, imams, whatever, who unfortunately carry on eating and without thinking, hold on a second here, I need to kind of alter my life. Some things are out of their power. When you finish teaching at 8, 9 o'clock, you finish teaching at 8, 9 o'clock. You can't necessarily have your evening meal at 4 o'clock or something, because then 9 o'clock you're going to be hungry. So they're eating very late. Eating also habits aren't necessarily good habits, I have many colleagues who I know love their fast food. And I will say to them, look, as much as a burger is very tasty, as much as chicken wings are very tasty, as much as all the rest of it is, you have to be very careful in what you consume. And you have to take it easy, because it will have a direct impact. However, the attraction of fast food, the taste of fast food is too alluring. And so there's an education element as well, that to become more aware of what kind of foods are good and what foods are bad. Kind of becoming more aware of fats, carbohydrates and proteins. So, you know when to consume when should you have. And then carbohydrates can either be simple carbohydrates or complex carbohydrates. So a simple carbohydrate is something you can consume virtually like a sugar, and you can literally burn it off in the next half an hour. But a more complex carbohydrate will take some time to break down. So that might take a couple of hours, 2-3 hours before it breaks down, because it's a little bit more difficult to digest. So when should you have a complex carbohydrate? Should you be having that at 9, 10 o'clock at night? Or should you be having that maybe at 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon? And then when it comes to fat, well, fat is just no good to anybody. And the thing is, if you're consuming a lot of fatty food, and fried food is fatty, and if you're having all these, high sugar foods and desserts and food which has an excessive amount of fat, then there's no good in that whatsoever. Fat isn't really good to burn as fuel. And also, it's useless as muscle. All it does is just packs on your on your stomach or on your sides, or, you know, for men it's different. For men it goes straight to the gut, and it goes straight to the edges and the back, and then maybe around the chest area, and the chest starts to drop. For women, it might go towards the thighs and the bottom area. So it stays, and getting rid of fat is very difficult, because you've got to be quite high intensive exercise to kind of burn that off, and sustained over a period of time. The best way to do it is have a good hour and a half walk in the evening to just kind of burn that off, because, you know, going to the gym or whatever, that might be useful for building muscle if you're doing that. But to burn off something, you need to be doing these sustained, long-term, intensive periods of physical activity. So in a nutshell, it's not a single answer. It's, you know, education, it's the amount of food, it's the type of food, it's the timing of the food, it's the lack of exercise. So all this then adds up. And once you get past a certain point as well, you kind of become quite defeatist. You know, you kind of wave the white flag and think, forget it, yeah. Who's going to do a diet? You know, I'm getting fat, so I'll live with it. It's one of them things. And losing heart as well is not a good thing, because, you know, you can turn things around. There's so many stories that you hear of people who, you know, get to 18, 19 stone, 17 stone, 16 stone, and they're only 5'9", 5'10", and they're clearly overweight. Some are in obesity, and then they suddenly just, you know, say that's enough. But the later you leave that, the worse things will get. The reason why I explain that is, for instance, if you're a 5'7", 5'8" tall person, and you weigh about 70 kg, then that's about right, because 70, 74, 75 kg, that's about right. Why? Because your body, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created it, your heart, your lungs, your kidney, your liver, and all the rest of you, your pancreas and all the rest of it, are created in such a way for a 75 kg human. Yes, give or take, you can go maybe up to 78 kg and your body still can cope. But once you start going over 80, 85, 90 kg, 95 kg, your body now is not made, your organs are not made for that. So it starts to put undue stress on your organs. So your liver is working a lot harder, your heart is working a lot harder, your kidneys are, and everything is working a lot harder. And then because of the food you're consuming, things start to get blocked. Arteries start to get blocked. You know, your sugar levels in your blood start to go up or go down, your insulin level, you know, you start having problems. So then you get, whether it's heart conditions like angina or heart attacks or whatever, or whether it's sugar issues, diabetes, or any other. So you start to get these, unfortunately. And that really is simply based upon what you're eating, how much you're eating, when you're eating, and what are you doing in terms of exercise, physical activity. You know, if you know, one of these watches, you know, or any watch that is a smartwatch, or even a phone, you know, just try this experiment out. Go to your kind of, I think it's, I don't know, you know, Android might be different, but you go to your health app or its equivalent, and what the health app will do is measure your footsteps that you take during the day. So if you keep your phone with you, or if you have, like I said, a watch, it will count your steps. And when it counts your steps, it will tell you how many steps you've walked. Now, we've been told that we should be doing approximately 10,000 steps per day. Now, if you check your pedometer or your app on there, and it says 3,000, then you've not done anywhere near what you're supposed to be doing. And if yet you've consumed all that food, then you have a problem. You never mind a deficit. There's a huge difference. The other thing is water. Okay, what we don't do is consume enough water. Now, water's fine drinking it as a tea or a coffee, but not as a fizzy drink. Okay, not as a fizzy drink which is full of phosphoric acid, which is going to cause you more damage inside. You know, I'm sure you've seen the kind of YouTube videos where they take a rusty 2p coin and place it inside a particular brand of drink, and the one which has phosphoric acid in it. And when they take that 2p out, it's completely clean, right? Completely clean. Now, if that can take rust off a coin, off a copper coin, then what do you think it's doing to your insides? Okay, and bearing in mind as well that there's already acid inside your stomach. at a low pH, pH 1 or something, and then you're taking phosphoric acid, which is also around pH 2, 1, then it's going to have, problems with your stomach, because your stomach's not really used to dealing with adding more acid, and that's when you start getting acid reflux. So then when you're going to sleep at night, you can feel this burning sensation, because the first thing you're getting is heartburn, because what's happening is the food is bubbling back up, okay, because there's so much gas in there, okay, the gas has to escape somewhere, so it's either going to go downstairs or it's going to come upstairs, and usually it bubbles back upstairs because pushing gas through your intestines is going to take a lot longer than pushing it back up here and you burping it out, or worst case, vomiting it out. So what happens is, this is when you get acid heartburn. So you get people complaining a lot of heartburn, oh, I've got heartburn or whatever. And then obviously you get acid reflux, where it comes right up your throat and you're fast asleep at night and you can literally feel acid in your throat, in your mouth, until you wake up and swallow it back down. And then you have a seriously burning sensation in your neck, in your throat, because of it. Now all this is caused by, the same things again. So what you eat, when you eat, how much you eat, all these three things, this is all to do with that. In fact, virtually all, apart from genetic illnesses, which are very few, okay, genetic illnesses which are very few, majority of the illnesses that we suffer are self-induced. We do them to ourselves, okay? And we do that how? By what we consume, when we consume, and how we consume. These are key things. So water, again, you could do this test, is we're supposed to be drinking, for a bloke of average height, should be drinking anything up to 4 litres of water. 3 to 4 litres of water. Minimum 3, but it should be around 4 litres of water. Now you ask yourself, do you drink 4 litres of water? If you're not sure, get a couple of 2-litre water bottles in your house, place them there, and every time you drink water, just pour it out from the bottle rather than going to the tap. Or when you make a cup of tea, use that water from there. And see how much water you actually drink in the day. Now we are made 70-odd% water. So if you're not topping up that, and when you speak, saliva comes out, okay? Naturally, during the day, your body is using water. You're going to the toilet, you're going to the lavatory, so you're disposing water. Even if you don't feel like you're sweating, you actually sweat, okay? Without realizing it. Just because you don't feel a wetness doesn't mean you've not sweated. You have. It's just that because it's at a temperature which it has not come wet, it has just been sufficient for your body temperature to be cooled, and the sweat has evaporated, okay? Because that's what sweat's doing, is taking the heat from your body. In that case, what you're doing is that, and you could tell, because when you smell your clothes afterwards, you can smell a sweaty odor, or if you smell your armpits or something, you'll smell a sweaty odor. That's because you have sweated, even though you've not experienced it. So we're constantly losing water. So if you're not replacing that water, you get dehydrated. That has another impact. In fact, would you believe, you can actually lose weight by drinking more water. Because naturally, water is going to fill your stomach, so it gives you a full feeling anyway. So you don't want to eat. Also, what you find is in your intestines, there's always something left behind. Okay, even though you push out as much of the feces out, some of it still gets left behind. So it needs to be well washed out, so that at least everything is given a good wash, and that what you're doing is removing any waste that's been held in there for longer. And likewise, you don't want any waste just kind of loitering around in your stomach. And that's where we get things like constipation. We get constipation because as the intestines are pushing down the feces, they're squeezing it. And as they're squeezing it, water is being released. Now, if you didn't take much water, your body does not want to give any more water up. So it squeezes it literally dry. And then you're trying to pass dry stools, which I can tell you is not very comfortable. Okay, so that's another problem. Again, if you're not consuming a right amount of fiber, then the feces does not have anything to hold water, because it needs fiber to hold onto the water, so that when you pass your stool, it's somewhat more palatable, it's somewhat more malleable, it's soft, it can be passed without any problems. So really, that, I hope, it answers the question why, unfortunately, we find the ulama slightly more pot-bellied or slightly more chubby around the edges than we should, compared to the general public as a percentage. So yes, I hope some ulama are listening and watching, so they can take those necessary steps. The other question was about menopause. Now, menopause is something, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created man and woman. We know that the Islam does recognize the third gender, that gender which has both female and male physical anatomy, but it bases the human on their biology, not upon their mindset, not upon what they think they are or what they believe they are, but what they physically look like. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole discussion and debate about gender and what gender is and how we understand it. Sometimes people don't like to use the word gender and use the word sex, because sex means, male, female, that's it. Whereas gender seems to suggest that it can be something which is a social construct. But again, let's leave that to one side. Let's move on. So biologically, Allah SWT creates a man. Biologically, Allah SWT creates a woman. And when they become of a certain age, then He allows them to have children. So a girl can only have children when she becomes a woman. So whether that be whatever age she can menstruate, she's now a woman and she can have children. Now that's just the physical time she's ready. A boy could, possibly have children when he's 10, 11, 12 years old. Now just because somebody's physically ready for having children doesn't mean that they're psychologically ready or mentally ready or mature enough. So that doesn't mean, obviously, it's against the law in the UK anyway and in other countries as well, but that doesn't mean just because two people can now have physically children, should have them. So obviously, we tend to get people married, or people get married rather, earliest is now in their 20s, mid-20s, late 20s, maybe even in their 30s when they decide to get married. For other reasons now, obviously, there's other social reasons, having sufficient money to buy a house, having a stable job, and all the rest of it. But anyway, when they eventually do get married, that's why there's always this push, isn't there, for women in particular to have children. Why? Because having children in your 20s and 30s, there's going to be more chance of a good pregnancy and a good delivery. Pushing that back to a woman in her late 30s, early 40s, there's more complications. Definitely when she starts to get into her late 40s, it does become more challenging to have children. Okay, doesn't mean it can't happen. I'm just giving you a general idea. So therefore, there comes a time when a woman will cease to be able to have children. That's when she reaches her age of menopause. So what happens in menopause? She ceases to have cycles, menstrual cycles, and she ceases to the capacity to bear children. Why? Because of Sharia, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala biologically is looking after the woman. Because if she still had the capacity physically to have children, she could potentially be having children in her 50s and her 60s and her 70s. And obviously that would possibly, if not, even though we have made massive developments in the medical sciences, would potentially bring about her death. And if not her death, would possibly bring about the death of the young child. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His rahmah, has this biologically prepared so the woman can, whereas if you look at the man can carry on having children till he's 70 or 75, as long as he has nothing physically wrong with him in terms of being able to have children. There's no stop where there's a male equivalent to menopause. He carry on. Why did Allah want to make that? Because it's going to be a burden on the woman to be able to A, have the child, and then B, raise the child as well, because that's another issue, because from the Sharia perspective, it gives the responsibility of raising children to the woman rather than to the man. The man is given as a role to be a breadwinner, not necessarily to be a nurturer of children. So this is why we find that women will go through menopause and men won't go through menopause for the obvious reason. So A, they don't have children and go through the difficulties of giving birth and the complications of giving birth, especially at such an old age. And the second issue is that those children which are born are then, going to be difficult to care for. Because let's just say a woman did not go through menopause and she got pregnant at the age of 62, she gave birth at the age of 63, child was born, she's 63 years old. What's the chances she's going to be around for this child to get to their 10th birthday? Pretty slim, okay, pretty slim. She could potentially die when she's 66, 67, and now you've got a 4-year-old child that doesn't have a mother. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala biologically made humans in this way in order for them to be able to have, successfully have children. So I hope I've addressed both questions in great detail. One is, why is Maulvi Sahab slightly rounded and not flat? And secondly, what does the Islam say regarding menopause in terms of its rationale, its basis, and also what it can be. And if we look at it from a spiritual side, it gives the woman now a chance to carry out her ibadah. If she's not having any menstrual cycles anymore, she can carry on now her ibadah. She does not need to stop for haid or anything like that. So therefore she can pray, she can fast, and she can now dedicate her time basically, so that she can, whereas when she was between her 20s and 30s up to her 50s, she was busy, having children and nurturing children. So in that note, mashallah, we now reach to the end of our session, and I hope that this session has been productive. Please do call in tomorrow. I will be back. The number to ring is 01274 214 299. That's the number to ring. No point ringing it now, but remember it for tomorrow. So if you've got any questions, at least we can start with some of your queries. If not, I receive numerous questions. I will start to go through those questions, inshallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all for listening. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to act upon what He said. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our sins and raise us amongst the pious. Ameen. So till the next time, wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.